Builders, backstories, breakthroughs. This is the journey in conversation.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Journey in Conversation. This month, I am absolutely thrilled to have with me in our virtual studio here, Steven Werley. He is the founder of Closable.ai, a really cool sales enablement tool that, as you might guess, uses AI. We're going to get into that. But first, Steve, how are you doing, man? Have a good weekend?
Yeah, no, it was great. And thanks for having me on, Paul. I got to watch the Eagles win on Thursday and enjoyed some less stressful football the rest of the weekend. So
That's going to make a lot of people super happy, and other people, well, maybe not so happy if what
That's
I know
right.
about the NFL and team fandom holds true. Well, we're glad that you're here on the show. And, why don't we kick things off, Stephen, by just talking about you a little bit? How about you give the folks at home a little bit of your origin story? Tell us what you're all about, what you've done, and, where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I live in Pennsylvania. I have a family here, and I always just like touching on that. It's always fun. Got a couple kids, got one on the way, and just growing and scaling and doing all the things. So, professionally, I started a business in 2016 after I separated from the military, and that was a marketing agency, and I ran that through about 2021. Where I decided at that point, I still continue to do some marketing strategy and consulting. And then I really started to grow more of a love for the sales aspect of what I was doing. I was selling everyone that I was doing any sort of consulting work for at the time. And that led me to starting a sales agency, finding a business partner, which was really fun and also came with a lot of growing pains, so to say. While I had some skill set in sales, it was a little bit different transitioning to the sales agency. And I was all of a sudden in charge of a lot of people. And I had to figure out systems in order to help them get better, learn the offer, right? So onboarding systems, but also things for them to improve. And what I like to call the feedback loop, right? So in sales, we call that a feedback loop. And a lot of different sectors of business use that term. But that was really difficult. So what I started to do was dive into the AI world and created ways to have AI duplicate myself in a way where it would look at things the way that I look at them through a similar lens, and learned how to train it and do it in ways that I do things. And that was able to provide much more feedback at a greater scale, allowing me to have much more efficiency. And I eventually decided to step out of the sales agency so that I could start to bring some of these systems and tools into organizations that have sales teams and are sales focused and sales first, but they lack any sort of clear direction to help that sales team get more out of their follow-ups, or more out of their just pipeline in general, maybe just in the closing aspect of it. But there's lots of gaps I'm sure we'll get into during the show that I'm more than happy to talk about and dive in. But that's the 1,000-foot view.
Yeah, it's the agency world is such an interesting world. Like, that's where I kind of started at my career, so I know quite intimately some of the challenges that you have in that environment, and how the sales development cycle goes when you're in an agency environment. Like, it's a little bit different from other industries. But let's roll it back a second. Thinking about the early days of when you were kind of starting up that agency, like, you kind of alluded to some of the chaos that was happening there. Get a little bit more into that. Like, what were some of the challenges that you faced early on, some of that chaos, and just elaborate a little bit on what it was and how you ultimately addressed it. I think that folks at home would love to hear about that.
Yeah. So when I started it all started as web design. And I quickly learned that, let me back up a little bit. All right. So I have a very technical background. I have a degree in computer science. I was a self-taught coder. I also have a degree in internet marketing, which I like to boast that I was valedictorian of. It was a remote online school, and there was only like 20 some people in the class. So, woo me. But so anyways, just to kind of talk about this, I actually, when I got out of the military, I actually took a job, and that job was for coding, and it lasted about 2 months. It was a programming language that I had never heard of, and most people haven't heard of. It's called Appian. It's business process management. I had some good strategies I learned around it. However, the company that I went into, a buddy from college of mine helped me get that position when I was getting out of the military and going through the whole, discharge process that happens. And I was really, really grateful for the opportunity, but they were just so small. They didn't really have the time to help me learn this. And I was also a few years now removed from coding constantly. So it was like a new language where there's only documentation on one website for, and I hadn't coded in a while. And I was just like, man, I feel over my head here. So mutually decided to split ways. I brought it up with the CEO, and CEO was like, yeah, I think it makes sense to, let me give back the laptop and stuff like that. So all good. And I decided to start doing websites out of that. Like, as I was like towards the end and kind of doing that, I was like, oh, you know what I want to do? I want to build websites for people because I can do this fairly easily on WordPress, pretty technically, and do custom type stuff there. And if you need to edit the CSS or HTML, I can do it. So that's how it started. Lots of networking, lots of local type of sales. I did a thing where I was doing a free website for a nonprofit every year, and that was always good because it's a tax write-off and they like to talk. So it was strong, but then I was moving from Pennsylvania to Virginia, and at the time I was in a BNI group. Do you know what BNI is in Canada? You guys have BNI groups? It's a networking group that that you have one seat per industry in, and it's a referral-based group. So you have to pay to play, basically, and you stay in based on how many referrals you pass. So it's all about each other passing each other referrals. So with that, I was VP of that at the time when I was moving, so I had to transition out of that. And then I was trying to figure out the way of how can I not localize this, because now this all of a sudden doesn't feel secure. So that was the first time, and I was only 6 months into the business at that point, where I was like, okay, I did everything the way that I thought I should be doing it, at least in 2016, and I think I was doing it pretty well. But then all of a sudden it was like, well, now I'm moving and I have no engine again, right? So there's no way for me to grow this thing without going back into the local community, which I did. I went back into the local community in Virginia. However, at the same time, I was like, well, I put a lot of work into marketing, and I started to learn more about funnels and the way they worked, and trying to really understand the process behind it. So I was serially hopping on webinars and just watching and learning from all the big players. So like, Neil Patel and all those guys. Like, obviously Neil was big in the SEO world and still is. But like, Frank Kern, like all those guys were just huge during that time. And I was watching webinars, and even though I wasn't buying stuff for the most part, I was able to learn a lot without just getting their, actual templates. So with the base knowledge I had, so I started to look for clients around that and started creating some videos and things of that nature. I was able to start to shift into the bigger internet marketing world, so to say. And the reason I wanted to go back in time before is that my brain had started to be turned by that couple months that I was with this company, because they did business process automation. And that was just something that we talk about. It's almost its whole industry on its own, but we talk about it in marketing all the time, how we can do marketing ops and automation and things like that. And then, that just kind of continued to build and build and build to where I'm at today, because almost everything I do to an extent has to do with business process automation, but now we're adding the AI layer on top of it too, right? So, I think that the hardships, early on was that insecurity that I felt, and then just being able to shift into more of a remote space and build upon that. So that's how I took it. Eventually, COVID hit, and I had moved back to PA about a couple months before COVID hit. And I was running a system towards the tail end of my marketing agency days. The thing that I was doing and running, and I actually, Digital Marketer, the company, paid me a talk on this. I was a certified partner with Digital Marketer on the time. I put together a method for getting sales in a way that worked really well. And I can't take all the credit myself. I was in a mastermind at the time too, and I was getting some help from those folks, right? So I don't want to say like I'm like this mega mastermind. I think we all come down to, like when you're on a team, they say you always, fall to the level of your, like, if you're in a running team, I'm a runner, so you fall to the level of your slowest person or whatever. I think it's like that. Like your network is your worth in a way, and the people you keep around you help either ascend or descend you. So anyways, this strategy, fairly simple, and other people have done it, right? I'm not the architect of this, but I was hopping on a discovery call that was about 20 minutes. And in that 20 minutes, I would just get to know them and basically tell them my offer, which was to hop on a strategy call, which was basically a half-day session, but I would give them the full day if they wanted it. Nobody ever needed to stick around for a full day. And I would charge like $2,000 for that. And then that $2,000 was a session where we deep dived into their business, and I gave them, this is the plan, like this is what you need to do. And we would look for holes and revenue leaks and things like that from a marketing standpoint at the time. So I was acting more as like a fractional CMO. And then from there, they could decide to hire me as a consultant and help carry out that plan or not. And if they hired me, then that money was allotted to the start of the working relationship. So that was a strategy that was working really well, but I was just really starting to get over the marketing aspect as a whole. And I felt like I was just continuing to pigeonhole myself into more and more services. And I wanted to get out of the services. And I did enjoy the sales and I enjoyed the rush, but I also at the time didn't want to build a big team around marketing. Not because I didn't want to build a team. I love working with people. I just didn't want to build it around marketing. Like I think the marketing had like took its course at that point, which is when I started to shift more into sales.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to kind of drill in a little bit on something you said before. So when you were talking about, hey, we're kind of shifting into this new thing, the marketing thing, and one of the things early on that was kind of a bit of a thing for you, and to be honest, for everybody who starts their own business, is the feeling of confidence being a bit of a challenge. And I assume that imposter syndrome kind of like tags along with that, and you get into that mindset where it's like, geez, do I really know what I'm talking about? Do I know what I'm doing? How did you cope with that? Did you have any methods or strategies that you kind of employed that helped you kind of spin yourself out of that? I mean, I would assume that also the discipline that you picked up being in the armed forces contributed significantly, but what else was there?
Yeah, I think that is a really, really tough aspect to this whole entrepreneurial journey in general. And any time that you're tied into trying to bring results in for a business, and that's how you're looking at your own worth, it's going to creep in at some point. And I also wasn't the biggest paid ads guy. So while I did paid ads at the time, it's not like what I was doing was so black and white where it's like, okay, I run ads and either makes money or it doesn't. So I'm either succeeding in what I need to be doing or I'm failing. And I know there's a lot more to it than that. I'm just trying to simplify this a little bit. But when you're talking about like putting together full campaign strategies, like, okay, this is how this funnel is going to look and this is how that's going to look. But then there's someone else running ads. you don't have total control of the system. So you have to be okay with that in a way. But I think that ultimately was part of the reason why I wanted to step also away from the marketing side, because I didn't want to have to handle the whole paid ad side and manage that. Not because I was scared of the results. It's just that it wasn't the piece that really excited me. And I also didn't have somebody close to me that I was going to be able to partner up with at the time to be able to like take over something like that I would have been able to trust. So that's why I did ultimately step away from it. But when it comes to imposter syndrome as a whole, I'll tell you there's two things that I use to overcome. One is the book called The Alter Ego Effect, which is an amazing way to approach any situation that you're in. And when you're stepping into one task, you're adjusting who you need to be in order to become that person. And you create a persona. And one of the things is, for example, like if you're going to speak on stage, like it could be like glasses like this, right, that you put on. I don't wear them when I do the podcast interview. They're just blue light glasses because it creates weird shadow with my lighting. The other thing that I have really taken up in, and this is more recently, the past couple years, is stoicism and being more at peace with what is and what I can't control. So I really, really have gotten into this belief that there's a level of things that I just cannot control. And there's things that can happen that I just can't necessarily account for either. I try to account for everything, like I think a lot of people do, which I think is healthy. Like try to understand, like, hey, these are all the potential outcomes, but understand that not all the outcomes are necessarily something that we can do. I'm a really big personal responsibility guy. And I think it was really hard. I also was very hard on myself my entire life, whether it was, racing in high school and college, or my performance in the military when I was, going through some tests or something, or, whatever it is, or, obviously in the marketing side of and business and bringing results, you judge yourself and you always feel like, oh, I could have done better here. I could have done better here. And there's a level of that that's healthy, where it's like, hey, okay, let's analyze and see what happened, and let's see if there are improvements to be made. But if it's always, for a lack of better term, shitting on yourself, then that creates a massive insecurity within you. So picking up stoicism has made me a better business owner, a better husband, a better father, all across the board, because it just allows you to have this level of, if my toddler's going to sit here and scream, I don't need to, scream back or something like that. It's like there's a level of like peace that you just kind of like, there's an acceptance that you can't control all that, right? So, and it's funny, like just to play on that angle a little bit, I think anybody here that has kids has seen their toddler like start to do something where you're like, oh no. And mine will like walk around with things that like, plastic bat or something and get pretty close to the TV, which is level enough for him to hit. And as soon as he started being able to like walk and get close to the TV, I actually already have this like premonition in my head that one day that TV is just going to be smashed, and that's it. Like, so I'm like kind of prepared for it in a way. So I think there's just this level of peace that you have. And it's like, obviously I don't want that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen, but stoicism has been huge. Alter ego effect, I think, was the start of understanding how you can adjust who you are in a certain situation. That doesn't mean you change who you are at your core. It just means that, when it's time to get down to business, you can get down to business, right? When I'm a coach for a cross country team, when I'm coaching, it's those kids. It's different than what I do when I'm working with sales folks. Even though it's a lot of the same principles, it's just different mindsets that you got to get into and make sure you're acting the same or acting the way that you need to act in that situation. So,
yeah, accepting the inevitability of certain things that are likely going to happen, and being at peace with different outcomes is it's a great coping strategy, in a lot of different parts of life. Buddhists kind of espouse the same sort of thing: be at peace with the inevitability.
Meditation helps too. Absolutely.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And even, if you're not kind of that person who will go full into like practicing meditation seriously, even breathing exercises and whatnot can help. But it's one thing that always kind of interests me when it comes to talking about these journeys we have with acceptance and inner peace and everything. And stoicism is particularly kind of grounded in this. That acceptance is really powerful and really helpful, but the journey of getting from where you are to a place where you can be accepting of outcomes and inevitabilities is quite difficult. It's not like you when you read about it in books and stuff, it kind of comes across as like, hey, let's snap our fingers and the switch is gone and it's done and that's that. But in practice, like it's a heck of a journey to get to that place emotionally and kind of mentally. What helped you? Because I would gather that it wasn't just like, hey, the switch got flipped and I was able to accept things. What helped you on that journey of coming to acceptance as a practice?
I am actively in the middle of it's like a 52-week it's a workbook for stoicism that is fantastic. Like if I had one recommendation to make, like that would be it. So it's like I'm gonna pull it up. I'm gonna pull it up for you as I'm talking about it. It's a handbook for new Stoics, it's called. It's fantastic. You can probably find it like, your Barnes and Noble or on Amazon or wherever you want. But it actually walks you through the exercises each week to start to be okay with that. So I think that's been one of the biggest game changers, because I was improving before by reading, passages and just kind of like studying things, or, doing meditation here and there. And I wish I was more consistent with meditation. It's like the hardest thing for me to find a time where it's like, okay, I'm going to take these 10 minutes and like open up the Fit Mind app and do a meditation. This is what I use, but I wish I was more consistent with it. And sometimes I'm better at nighttime too, but then, the kids are running around and it's wild. So it's really difficult. And then you don't want to like leave your spouse alone with the kids going nuts when she's, about to birth another one in 2 months. So but yeah, that book, huge. I would say that's definitely a great, thing that puts everything that you're thinking about into actual practice. So each week you're actually doing something to get you to that point. And I think with everything, there's no firm destination on it, right? The whole thing is a journey, and no pun intended. Wow, holy smokes, right? That's the name of this whole thing. But like that's it, right? There's just no destination on it. And whatever you're doing, you're trying to improve. It's not finite. So you have to really be willing to go through it and continue to work. If you don't have an open mind and you're not willing to put in the work to yourself, I think that's where the failure happens. But if you have that open mind and you're honest with yourself and your shortcomings and things like that, I think that's huge. And not to get too deep, but I think one of the things that really set me down the path was a couple years ago, I unexpectedly lost my father. And I think that put a lot into perspective, because both sides of my family are stubborn, like of my parents and their parents are stubborn and like quick to anger. And it's like fighting against that is really tough. And I am still quick to anger at times. I'm definitely intense. Like I'm not perfect by any means, but sometimes you need that wake up call, I think, to be like, okay, like, where am I at in doing this? And not that I felt like I was a bad person, but I definitely had things to work on. Right. So I think that's a huge part that led to me just continuing to be like, I need to be better, because every day that I'm here counts. And every day that I am here, I want to make it, the best for those around me. There's a passage in the Stoicism book that really hit home, and it talks about it's about marriage, and it's a quote from someone else. So I know I'm not going to hit the quote dead on, but it talks about, a lot of people say, I just want my wife to love me more, or I want my husband to love me more. And it's like, why is that not the way it is? And instead of thinking that way, of being like, why don't you love me more? Be like, how can I live every day to be the best husband that I can be? And that's it, because that's what I can control, right? And then if I do that, my wife will love me more, right? In a way. And there's obvious exceptions in people that we marry, and I'm divorced once, so I get it to an extent. But if you look at it through the lens of like, hey, what can I control? I can get up, I can do the dishes, I can do this thing. As long as you found the right life partner, I tend to find that the other person's not just going to sit around and take it for granted. And that's a beautiful thing in itself. So.
Yeah, absolutely. This seems like a pretty good segue into another part of the show where I kind of like to grill people on, well, what hasn't gone right? Because I believe personally that failure isn't absolute; it's not permanent, and it's one of the best learning opportunities. Like having failed at something gives you a heck of a chance to improve and to be better. So let's kind of steer into that with you. What's something that comes to mind where you gave it just the old college try, and no matter what you did, it went splat? What was that like? What was that, and how'd you deal with it? And most importantly, what did you learn from it coming out the other end?
Yeah, I think, to me, it comes back to the sales agency, and I don't think it's because I know what the problem was now, and like I did at the end, but I was blind to it like the whole time. And it wasn't because me or my partner weren't good at training sales or finding good talent or anything like that. We were going after the wrong clients, and that doesn't mean that the clients were too small, and we weren't able to make money from them. We were going after people that weren't properly vetted, and we got ripped off too many times. And towards the end of that, it ultimately led to us each losing a few $100,000 that we should have got. And then like two other people like should have also got that. And then closers should have got that. Right. So like it was a lot of money, when the big one hit, but it already happened in small increments throughout the whole thing. So it got to the point where it was like, okay, like this can't keep happening. So like, this is it, right? Like it just felt like, we could transition into trying to do some different clients, but the experience in some of those other areas wasn't quite there. And both really good at sales and could find ways to make it work and make money work. So I'm, transitioned more into Closable.ai because, well, what I have now are systems that is something that I can put into any business that has a sales team, because they need to be able to get feedback, and they need to be able to have better visualization of their pipeline and be able to follow up and close people more. If that can be streamlined and simplified, that's a value that I feel like I can bring to any organization, whether I have the most experience in it or not, whether that's in like, the oil and gas industry or B2B, or whether it is, some form of B2C or, investment type thing. It just really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, sales is sales, and it's human to human. And that process is that process. So I don't have to know everything about a specific industry, and AI can kind of teach me about a process for that industry as well. So whether there's RFPs or there's no RFPs, it doesn't really matter at that point. So, that was probably the hardest pill to swallow, that whole sales agency piece. And I just, at that point, I just kind of accepted it, at the end, but it did suck, knowing how much money that we just lost. So like that was, so yeah, but that
Yeah,
happens, right? And like, you could do the
yeah.
lawsuit, you could go after them. It's like, is the energy worth it? Is that like the bad energy and like going through that process and the amount you're gonna have to spend on lawyers on the upfront, like, is it worth it? It's like, maybe, I don't know, but I didn't feel like it was worth it. So I didn't.
Yeah, and I'd imagine going through that, one of the things that kind of bounces around in your brain a lot is like, shit, what should I have done differently
Yeah.
to prevent this? Like what could have, what could have been different? Like was it me? Was it them? Was it a mix? Like how did that all work? Like that must have been bouncing around
Yeah.
your brain a lot too.
We gave too much. It's kind of a hard line because you want to trust people, but you at the same
Mhm.
time need to have boundaries, and that was the hardest thing. So we had this general policy that we didn't allow the sales team to interact with the owner of the organization we were selling for, or offer owner or whatever, which sounds pretty harsh. I will tell you, literally every time that we broke that rule, including this case, it ended up in us losing money because there is too much greed from, at least in a commission only salesperson role, which, like, we were all commission only. We were completely commission based. That's how we made our money. There wasn't a base we were getting or anything like that. So the second that broke through and that contact was initiated and we allowed that to happen because we felt like we could trust somebody, or they were of a higher, like they were more than just, a salesperson here to just sell and whatever. And they were more part, like they had, that extra brain, right? They wanted to give more. We wanted them to give us more. It broke, right? Like, and it's just human tendency where that greed steps in. And are there things that we could have controlled to prevent that outside of that? More ironclad contracts maybe, and things like that. Sure, potentially. But at the end of the day, we had just it's just not the best system in my eyes, honestly. Like when I look at the whole thing now, like it's not so much like, hey, could we have fixed how this all worked? Maybe, but I just don't think the system of the whole external sales teams is a great solution at this point. Like that's ultimately where I land. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone out there will prove me wrong. But people do it successfully, and they make a lot of money, but they also lose a lot of money, right? So it's like you kind of know, like, oh, I could have this account, and it could make 50,000 a month, 100,000 a month, right? Like just managing a sales team. And that's a real possibility in that world. But you could also put a lot of weight into an account like me and my partner did, and it comes all crashing down. And then it's like, okay, well, now we would need to find new accounts and rebuild and do all the things. And it's like, it's too much up and down. There's no real steadiness to it. And you're also, the entire business model still comes down to an extent to the business being able to fulfill and handle things, and whether their marketing's in check or not. We actually were taking on some of the marketing aspects too, and even running some of the ads and driving our own leads because we were getting better commissions out of it, and we knew we could do that. So the business owner was literally just like, oh, I just got to fulfill, right? And they were paying us a nice chunk because we're fronting ad money, we're running the ads, we're paying the marketing person, we're doing the sales, right? So but ultimately that greed steps in, and the business model is just not great. And there's just those salespeople that exist in general where they have that very alpha mentality. Nothing like, and I don't mean that in a way that all those salespeople are like that. Like I'm just saying that there's an obvious ego piece in sales, and you need it. You need it to win. You need it in sales to an extent. Some people have it more than other, and then some of that let them drive their ethics, and some don't. But it's really hard to completely filter out as well. So
yeah, the ego piece, the confidence, when you're selling based on commission only, like there's no draw or anything. That's you got to have that for it to work, or else it doesn't work. In an environment like that, it always strikes me that when you're in an environment like that with a model like that, getting the incentives properly aligned is extremely difficult. You know, you can take a commission-based salesperson and say like, hey, you're going to go and sell like this thing, and you're going to get 20 points or 25 points or 30 points, like go. That's pretty straightforward. But as you brought up, like when things kind of get murky around the edges, and it gets difficult, those incentives become misaligned like really, really, really quick. So it kind of makes sense that you wouldn't have, or you'd have that kind of rule in place that says like, hey, they can't talk to the owner, because that's where the incentives start to like, they kind of fracture and splinter a little bit and not in your favor. And as you bring up also, you know, the whole lawyer thing, like, hey, can we sue? Should we have stronger contracts or whatever? Like it always kind of strikes me that anytime you go to court to settle a dispute, the only people that really win, regardless of what way it goes, are the people who are billing the hours. Like it's a tough like system for like dispute resolution in a way that's like fair and equitable. Like, you know, 9 times out of 10, it comes down to who's got the bigger checkbook for their lawyers, right? That's not a great place to be in.
No, it's not.
Let's pivot a little bit and talk about kind of like the future. You know, we've really danced around, I think, the most interesting part of this conversation that's just to come. So you've gone from kind of running a sales agency into an AI augmented system that you install in businesses and do some coaching and some implementation around that augments sales in a very different way. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your work with Closable and how that works? Because it strikes me that, you know, it's kind of a continuation of the theme that you were talking about with the sales agency, just a little bit smarter, a little bit different.
Yeah, hopefully, right? Maybe there's a massive lesson to learn there too, right? I'm sure there is, but hopefully not business ending. So, yeah, you know, Closable is, to me, it's like the first real like baby that I feel like I had in the business world. Like I feel like a lot of people, like they build something and they have you know, that thing that they are really attached to. And it's different when it's just like, okay, I'm doing marketing services. Like, yes, like, you know, that's your baby. Don't get me wrong. But when it's like, yeah, I built like a lot of these systems like from scratch and built them up within the agency. And now it's like, well, now I have this and I have this value that could help almost like in my mind, almost every sales based organization. You know, anyone that's not just selling on the internet, like a e-com product or something like that, like everyone that's doing some form of sales can benefit from this. So, you know, I am really high on it. Obviously, I'm bullish on it. But that's for the market to ultimately decide. The idea is that, you know, and obviously I touched on it. There's aspects to the sales process that we don't always do the best job at. And that's every single organization, every single salesperson does some things better and some things not as well. And my idea is, well, what if we can make that more consistent? What if we can knock out the people that are super egotistical, but are the absolute highest performer? And again, there are high performers that are not like that, don't fit that bill. But like, what if we can take, you know, maybe a B player who's a perfect culture fit within a sales organization and help them ascend to performing at that way that, you know, that highest performer does? How can we create consistency within the sales process? How can we have realistic projections within the sales process? And there are tools that do this to an extent, but they're not hyper personalized. There's some personalization that exists, but they're not hyper personalized. I luckily have the background that's unique that I feel fills the need. You know, not to just sit here and you know, pitch my own brain, but like most people don't have, you know, the computer science degree, the military leadership background, the marketing background that bleeds into the sales and running the sales agency and like helping on those people, and then like running the business, essentially a business from some perspective from 2016 onward to this point, you know, almost 10 years in. And there's just a lot of things that I've seen, and there's obviously people with way more experience than me in certain sectors, but I've seen a lot, and I've seen how it all works. And when you look at everything, there's an initial process in the sales process where there's a research or pre-call piece that happens. Well, we can use AI to figure out information about the prospect we're talking to, especially in like a B2B world, right? And we can get insights into that business fairly quickly. Some companies do this and they do it manually, and they spend 2 hours on research there instead of spending 10 minutes on doing it, right? So that's like phase one of a sales process. Then phase two would be that that initial call or two calls that happen, depending whether you have like an SDR and main call. But I like to just kind of combine those in, where you're having like this first initial like main conversation, you're explaining your services and you're making some form of pitch, and they're deciding whether maybe they're going to do business with you or they have to take it back to their team and all that, right? That needs feedback, right? You need feedback on that piece. Again, some sales teams do that well, some don't. Okay, so then we have that. Let's say we didn't close them, which is the vast majority, right? Because good teams are closing at, like great teams, I would say, are closing at 30 or 40%. And there's an argument that if you're closing at 40%, maybe, prices need to be raised, right? So, great sales teams, I would say, should be closing at, 30-ish%. And some close at 20% and some close less. Well, what do we do with the rest? Maybe we follow up a couple times half-heartedly. Maybe we booked a meeting from a meeting. Hopefully we did that. But what else are we doing? Maybe we put them in some marketing nurture sequence that exists within the CRM that we add a tag to. But it's not, as personalized as it could be or should be. And that's because up to this point, we really don't have the team size or the time to be able to do that, right? Where it makes sense, unless your ticket prices are so absurdly large where you can have all the support staff doing all those things. Well, now we do, and it's called AI, right? And AI, to me, isn't about replacing folks or getting rid of them. It's about how can we enable these sales folks to just do better and help them along. The other thing about salespeople is they're very tech averse. That was the hardest thing for me to learn, was how to serve these people when you are a super high tech person, because like, why can't you log in the CRM and do something? Like, they're not great at it. So, you take everything and you look at it, and it's like, okay, well, especially that post-call process. The pre-call process is almost a separate thing, right? But the post-call process is also another thing. And you need to separate those. And, if we have AI integrated with the CRM, or the CRM data is getting sent somewhere, and the call transcripts are being sent somewhere, and it can be organized and AI can understand it and the timeline and everything, it can grade prospects, it can look at calls, it can provide custom follow-up ideas, it can help coach you for that follow-up meeting and all those things. But not many teams are doing all of this, right? Some of them are doing some of it with AI now, but most of them aren't doing it all. And there was a stat that I pulled. I used AI to pull this. So Harvard and MIT did research, right? And it turns out that essentially the end result is every $100,000 you close, about $150,000 gets lost in revenue, right? That you miss out on. So let's just think about it a little bit bigger. Every $1 million a business does in revenue, if it's a sales-based organization, they're missing out on $2.5 million, right? So it's a difference between 1 and 3.5. It's massive. It's over 3x. And that's the same ad spend that you're putting out, the same everything, right? So all of that almost directly affects bottom line, not just top line. which is huge. So when we start thinking about profitability for a business and long-term success and what can fuel or lead to bigger growth initiatives, or, getting a better EBITDA if you're looking to exit the business or whatever, these things are insanely important. So what I've done is I've, created systems where when you integrate all this stuff, you could have it as simple for a salesperson as them being in Slack, and it's like a Slack bot that's just like, okay, you need to send a follow-up message to this person now. Like, and it knows the order of tasks that you need to hit. Be like, this is the email, right? And you can either say good or you can edit it and then say, okay, good, send it, right? And everything syncs up with the CRM. You can move it to a different stage if it needs to. It can add a note in there. You have a meeting coming up. It should know the past transcript and what happened, anything that's happened in between, and be able to be like, this is what you need to cover in the meeting. These are your talking points. And it should be trained on your offer too. It shouldn't just be, based on that. It should have very, very intricate offer knowledge where it knows how to help. It should know how you guys do your pricing or your discounts or anything like that, and help give insights into how to handle all that on the calls. So that's the system, at a high level view that all these things that I've built, within and internally for different, organizations and whatnot, that I'm packaging up. And it's not perfectly packaged up yet. So I don't want to say hey, you just sign up and it's like some software or something. I actually believe that SaaS is dying. So this is not a SaaS. It is relatively, implementation focused right now. And it's going to turn and get more systematic as it goes. But because everybody's using different CRMs and different tools and different, call recording things, there's a level of customization to how it all works and syncs up. So there's no perfect way to just integrate it all with the snap of your fingers. But yeah, taking a look at all that and figuring out the best way within a company's sales process and what tools they're already using, and getting the salespeople to have something like that, it lowers their use of tech, and it makes them more efficient and has them focusing on what they need to focus on without them having to think about that, right? And look, there's still human intuition. They're so human in the loop. They're still reviewing everything that needs to get done, right? Because AI is not perfect, and I want to make sure that's clear. So they should be making executive decisions on things, but AI there for consistency and building those things. I bet you can capture a lot of that 150K that you don't get every 100K. I'm not saying you're going to get it all, but if in your downtime, exactly who to email and what to send, and it's customized and it's not just some generic follow-up automation, that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, this really, the more that you talk about this, the more it, the way that I would describe it anyway is it's kind of a force multiplier for sales teams.
Yeah,
right. Like the
idea.
whole,
That's a whole idea of AI, right?
yeah, and it's an interesting observation. You say that SaaS is dying, and I tend to agree a little bit. And I think that SaaS is becoming a little bit kind of dusty around the edges because of AI. Like the opportunities that AI really bring to the table for businesses is hyper personalized kind of stuff, like extremely micro optimized workflows. And when I used to kind of micro optimize workflows for different teams and different purposes, people would kind of look at me like I was crazy. And I just I always did it, but it's super time consuming. But now if you can have AI kind of micro optimize those workflows, then how do you create a more generic SaaS product that kind of captures the needs of so much of the market, when businesses can create a better internal product themselves using AI? And I think that that's really kind of that behind that phenomenon where we talk about, well, SaaS is kind of losing its glow.
Yeah, we're just getting close with the vibe coding things that are happening. Like we're not there yet, right? But I think almost everyone, like you said, they're going to have these custom softwares to an extent. They're just going to hire a vibe coder or create them a custom solutions to be way less than development costs were before. And there's going to be arguments for other things, in the future that are still very, in depth and whatnot. But ultimately, that's where most organizations are going to start to go to, I think, over time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to think about the impact of AI on the labor market too, right? And you mentioned earlier that you don't believe that AI is really good at replacing people. It's more about augmenting their capabilities and kind of finding a better fit. The reality about the transformation that we're already going through with the labor market is that jobs will be displaced. And on the other side, the argument is like, okay, yes, jobs will be displaced because we can do something better with AI than with a person. But that creates new opportunities. You mentioned that AI is not perfect. LLMs are never going to be perfect. Like fundamentally,
Yeah,
an LLM is just like an autocorrect on steroid, or like suggestive search on steroids. Like it's
exactly. And it's
generating
predictive
content.
text, right? That was, I think people don't realize the first iteration of AI in a way was the predictive text when we text on our phones of what are we going to say next. And that's what AI is. And it's obviously better than just that at this point, right? But that's the basis of it. Until it gets to a point where we would, talk about it being sentient or something, like, I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah. So thinking about kind of the other side of that, jobs will be displaced, put away. The labor market will change. And you mentioned like AI is not perfect. The kind of like fundamental phrase that I associate with that is you need to own the output as a user of AI.
Yeah.
So whatever comes out of it, like you need to be checking it. You need to be, making sure that it's
Yeah, you
on
don't
point.
trust that it's perfect out of the gate. You don't copy and paste it and dump it in the email and hit send, because there's probably 30 M dashes in that thing, and anybody who has used AI before knows that you literally just ran it through AI. So
Yeah. So for people who are kind of freaking out about jobs being displaced by AI, know that it's not perfect and it's going to create other opportunities. Really, the key for folks who are kind of worried about this is look at what those other opportunities are and start preparing. Easier said than done. But jobs aren't going to go away. They're just going to change a little bit.
well, I think,
And
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to kind of wrap up by saying uh, the value of human creativity, I don't think, and the value of kind of how we think and how we reason is going to increasingly be at the center of the new economy and the new labor
Yeah.
market and the new jobs. So, the more that we can think about that as people, like the better prepared we'll be. But go ahead.
Yeah, so just to touch on that point, one of the things is like, well, there's going to be new opportunities within AI and whatnot. And if you don't know where to start, like if you're one of those people who are listening and you're like, well, I'm a little bit worried, some people are going to lose jobs, right? Like not to be scary and like counter say what you said, like that's going to happen. But the people who know how to use AI are going to be okay, right? So if you're wondering where to start or what's going to come, like, don't worry. Like this comes back to the stoicism. Don't worry about it, right? Like, what can you control? Well, you can learn how to use AI in a good way. And even if your company makes cuts because of AI, there's going to be another company in your industry who's dying for your knowledge, dying for it. You will get a pay rate. Like, look at the way that the AI companies are snagging from each other's wheelhouse right now. Like Zuck is paying insane amounts of money to people. OpenAI is giving everybody $1 million once they've been on board for so long to prevent like other companies from snagging it. Like it's insane, right? So and obviously that's its own thing. But when you think about the ground level businesses, the construction businesses, like those types of businesses, they're slow to adopt. And if you have knowledge within an industry that you're working in, there's going to be someone out there who needs your skill set and expertise and knowledge about how to apply AI within their organization. And this is the best time to learn it, right? Because you're going to have such a leg up. And you can even carve out a role, even if it doesn't land you a promotion or anything, you can carve out some form of role within your organization where you're leading that AI initiative in a way that gives you that expertise that makes you just so invaluable either to the business that you're working in, whether you're, even if you're the CEO, right? Like, we just don't know how it's going to change. Like what I'm doing, I know could even be obsolete in 3 years because maybe we can just, open up an AI chatbot and it's going to automatically integrate all the tools and do what I'm asking it to do, right? Which takes a lot of time. But there's going to be intangibles that you have as a skill set that will get you to the next phase and let you be okay. Things are just going to change, right? Like you said, they're just going to change. We don't know exactly where or exactly how, but if you have the skill set, you'll be okay.
I want to ask you a question now. This has been a really fascinating chat. Like I'm so into this. If there was one piece of advice that you could take today and activate your little time travel machine and go back to 2016 Steven, what would you say to 2016 Steven?
Oh, it's only so I can't say the buy Bitcoin, right? Like that's not allowed.
Hey, I would say buy Bitcoin. I would say buy Amazon at $1.23. I would say a lot of stuff to 2016 Paul. But what have you learned? What advice would you want to give yourself?
Oh, that this is one of those. It's just so tough when you look back. It's hard because I think the lessons that you learn along the way drive you, right? If I could push through some of those earlier things faster, and provide that experience, or what was going to happen, in general with the marketing agency and whatnot, and going through that, I think I would have got there a lot faster. But looking at it all, if I had one thing that I would tell myself, I would say and I know we didn't really talk about it a ton today, but it would be do more documenting and content creation in the downtime. Like that would be my entire thing, because I know if I'd been doing that consistently, even since 2017, if we don't even count 2016, if I was doing that consistently since 2017, I mean, that's like 8 years of content that people would have, like, my authority level would be completely different. So, that would be the thing that I think would completely make any sort of pivot the easiest thing, would be a level of authority and being able to have that to utilize and leverage. So, and it allows you to meet really cool people. Like when you do these, podcasts, I'm on with you, Paul, right? Like you get to level up your network that way as well. So whether you're just, creating your own content, or whether you're hopping on podcasts or you have your own podcast, I think that's an extraordinary way to get a leg up in the long run. So, and it's hard to be consistent at it, but if you do that, I think anybody can succeed.
Yeah. You mentioned learning some lessons faster. And for me, that kind of connects to this concept of failing faster, accelerating failure. That's advice that I think is pretty good. And it's pretty like broad based.
Fail
right?
faster.
Yeah. Like if you can accelerate failure, so you get you get through the pain a little bit quicker, but you also get to like the good stuff that comes out of failure, learning a little bit quicker. You can be better off. A lot of us, we get caught in this trap of trying to cling to things a little bit when they're not going sideways. When if we just we took a step back and we said, hey, this isn't working out, so maybe I should push it further down the collapsing kind of like road, we'd be better off. But human nature, it's tough to do that when you're stuck in the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure is.
Well, let's leave it there. It's been a fantastic conversation. So we've got Steven Werley here. He's the founder of Closable.ai. We're going to put links to all of this stuff in the show notes. Steven, thank you very much for joining us on the show today, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for tuning in to the Journey in Conversation. If you liked this episode, follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. More builders, more breakthroughs, coming soon.